We all know that front-end interviews can be tough, and especially CSS one can be really tricky. So in this tutorial, we are going to look at top 10 CSS interview questions and their answers. And I'm going to take you from easier ones to tough ones, and I'm also going to show you probability of that question coming to your interview. Welcome to Texit Tutorials. The very first question is, what is box model? Or they can ask you this way, what are the properties related to box model? And to answer it, you can say that CSS box model is a box that wraps around every single element in HTML, which includes the content, padding inside, and then the border, and then the margin. In order to show it, give it some style. So I can say some height, let's say 100 pixel, some border 20 pixel, and some margin 30 pixel. Background color, let's say blue or something, solid red. And if I run this, it would give me some border. And in order to look at the box model, if I inspect it, I would see here the box model. As you can see, the content, which is 100 pixel, 100 by 100. Then I have a padding, which is kind of outside, and then the border, and then the margin. This is called, by default, every box is content box. So they also ask you another property, which is box sizing. And you can look at it. So if I say box sizing here, as you can see, it's content box, which means that the content, which is the center part of it, which is 100 by 100, the height and width, which is inside, and everything else is outside. But the border box is, if I say box sizing, let's say, I can say box sizing is border box, and run it, it becomes quite smaller, because now the border is part of the box itself. So the content shrinks. So before it was like 100 pixel height and width, and the content was also 100 pixel. But because the border is 20 pixel, it now gives a border inside. So the overall box is the same size, just the content shrinks to that 60 by 60. The probability of this question coming to an interview is very high. Almost I would say 70% of interview that I had, this question came up. One time I remember I just forgot to mention border. I just said padding and margin and the content, and the guy said, "You forgot one thing." And I was like, "What did I forget?" And then I realized that I forgot border. So just memorize it, I would say. You would know it, but you know, sometimes it just, your brain freeze when you have an interview. So, all right, the second question is, what is specificity? The way to answer is, if you have for an element, if you have two conflicting styles, so let's say if you have one style that is changing the color, background color, and you have a second style that is changing the background color of the same element, then the browser has to decide which one to apply, and it chooses based on the specificity. And the specificity is nothing but set of rules that it has. So let's look at those rules, and we're gonna just discuss some basic rules. There are so many rules, but we're gonna just look at some main rules so that we get most of the things covered. So let's say if you have an element and it has some text in it, and I can apply some style, and I can say background color is green. I would get a box with green background color. But what if I have a same div but different background color? Then which one your browser would choose? Would it be green or red? So the first rule is, if you have this kind of situation where the same element tag and it has different conflicting styles, then it would pick the last one here it's red. So if I run this, it would pick the red one. So that's the first rule. And to prove it, if I obviously move this up and run it, it will become green because now green is the last. Second rule is, let's say if I have a class here, equal to name. And here I'm just gonna say dot name. So here the first is just a common div, and the second one is specific to the name class. In this case, it should pick div.name because it's more specific than just a regular div. Means it applies to smaller sets of, wherever you have class name. And that's why it would pick this one. It doesn't matter which one is up or down, or last one in this case. So if I move it up here, it would still be green. The third rule is, let's say if I have ID, call my ID. Here I can say my ID and run this. ID wins over class. Even if I put ID up here, it would still be ID because ID has a higher priority than class when it comes to specificity. But what if I do this to a class? Now all the bets are off. It would pick green because I said it's important, and forcing this to pick this style. Probability of this question is I would say 40%. All right, the third question is how to align a block element inside another element, basically aligning center. Now there are many different ways to answer this question because you can use tables, you can use Flexbox, you can use CSS grids, or you can use just a plain old CSS positions to center it. And there are some other ways to do it. But what they're asking is using the plain old CSS rather than using the Flexbox or the other stuff. I have a tutorial on this whole topic which explains the Flexbox and the other methods. I'll provide a link here. So for that, let's have an outer div, and we have inner div. Okay, so we're gonna try to center this inner div inside the outer div. So the outer div and inner div is, let's say, and we can give some background color. Let's say this is yellow, this is, let's say, green. So right now the inner div always stays at the left top corner by default. Now what I want to do is this to be exactly center in the middle, and to do it I can, firstly what I have to do, the outer div, it has to have a position which is relative, and the inner div has to have position which is absolute. Now what I have to do is I need this green one to be top 50%, and when I do that it should move to the middle, but not quite. What it does, the box itself moves 50%, but it's top. So if you look at it, the top is actually 50% of the right in the middle. So this line is the center line. But what I wanted to do is I want half of it to be up here and half down. So I want to move itself 50% up. But before that, I would say left 50%. When I do that, it would also move 50% to left. And so this corner is the center of the yellow cube. So now I want this to move 50% of its size this side and 50% of its side on the top. So for that I would use transform translate, and I would say minus 50% minus 50%, and now it will be in the center. And since I've used a percentage, which means even if I change the size of the outer box, the inner box would still be center. And the probability of this question coming to interview is about maybe 20% of so. All right, the next question is, what is the difference between static, absolute, relative, and fixed position in CSS? And this is a very important question, and it is important to know this because if you're a CSS guy and if you don't know this question, then it's really bad. So I think it's very important to know. All right, to explain this, I have these three elements, and by default, they are all static. It goes by the nature of the flow, which means if the first element here, it will be stay there, and the second element will come after in the natural order that the static really means. Now, if I change the second one, position relative, nothing would happen. But if I apply some top, left, right, and bottom, let's say if I say top 50 pixel or something like that, and run it, it would move 50% from this original position down. Top means it will have a 50 pixel top and the gap, right? Similarly, I can say bottom, and it would move 50% up from this original position without affecting the element 1 and 3. As you can see, element 1 and 3 are exactly where they were. It just the element 2 is moving around using the top bottom. So, and also you can explain the use of this because this doesn't disturb its environment that much. Compared to position absolute, which we just looked at for the centering the element. Now, if you look at, the 3 actually moved up as if 2 doesn't exist. So like a 2 isn't actually in a separate space in a way. So that disturbs the environment. And now I can actually move, and it's actually referenced to its parent position. So if I just say top 0 means it would go up here, which is its parent, that the parent is the main container. So that's the main difference. And the fix is almost like absolute, but it's referenced to the entire page, not its parent. So it will stay wherever it is right now. So let's say if I have 3, if I just replicate 3 many times and run it, now I have 1, 2, 3, and the position is fixed. So the 2 actually stays where it is, and everything else is moving around it. So you can use for like advertisement, when you have a page advertisement which stays there, even if you're scrolling up and down the rest of the page. So that's position fixed. And again, if you want to understand it more, I have a tutorial on it. I'll provide a link here. A probability of this question is also very high. They may not ask you exactly the same question, but it's related to the position. You might get some question. The next question is, what is the difference between visibility hidden and display none? So only this element is hidden, but this other element is not hidden. So if I run it, as you can see, the top part is there, but it's not being displayed. That's why there is a gap here. But if I say display none, the gap is no longer there. That means the element doesn't exist inside the DOM. So it doesn't hold its position. Visibility hidden, the element is in the DOM, but it's not visible. And display none is element not inside the DOM, so it's not even gonna render. Probability of this question is also very high. I would say maybe 60% or so. All right, so this tutorial is getting a little bit longer, so I'm gonna split into 2 tutorials. So the next 5 questions, I'll provide a link at the end of this tutorial so you can follow it. And I hope you learned something from this tutorial. And if you did, please like, subscribe, and provide a constructive comment. Thank you.